to introduce Ozzy now to take the floor as our next speaker, who will tell us something about what's happening in Trinidad and Tobago industrial relations. So please take the floor, Ozzy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Luke. And of course, again, excellent presentation, Francisco. It tells us a lot that we have a lot of work to do in the progressive movement, a lot of work, but important work in order to defend social justice. Okay, so for my presentation, I will start off with a short PowerPoint to give the audience a sense of why it is termed an industrial relations crisis. So what I'm going to do is to share with you some of the headline news, and this is news that are happening very, very recent. I mean, we're talking about within the last few weeks, and even few within the last couple of days, actually. So I will just share with you if I can find it. Yes, I can. What is happening? So I will share this part, and then I will give a bit of an explanation as to what has given rise to this crisis. So just starting off, we have, this is the headline news. This would have been university lecturers taking action. They call it Black Friday at UWI, basically shutting down the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. Here we have a headline in The Guardian. These are our national daily newspapers. In The Guardian, these are front page news stories where workers gathered together, both port workers as well as electricity workers. This is another headline. This is again, electricity workers taking action at the workplace. Again, more action. There are about 4 locations across Trinidad and Tobago, and they've been taking simultaneous actions, and I will describe them a little bit later. Here we have the electricity workers going actually to the home of the Minister of Public Utilities, at least one of his homes. You know, these ministers have several homes. So they ramped up their protest with a candlelight vigil outside of one of his homes. But also port workers. You see almost a desolated Port of Spain. None of the shipments coming in or leaving. These are the port workers again, protesting just outside of the entrance of the Port of Spain. Here we have another headliner. You see Workers Unite, because as the different groups of workers were staging their different demonstrations, we've been seeing a coalescing of those struggles, showing again at the importance of solidarity. Here, the NP workers are also were also in protest. These are National Petroleum workers. These are the workers responsible for the distribution of fuel across the country. Then we even had pilots taking action. These are pilots staging a protest at the airport. These are the pilots for Caribbean Airlines Limited, and as I said, I'll talk a little bit about that. Then we see the postal workers also on the streets. We also see this headline about Stop Fanning the Flames, and I will talk a little bit about that, how Capital, the chambers of commerce united against the port workers. So I'll talk about that, and then here with more protests by the postal workers, and I'll describe their epic journey that they took as part of their show or manifestation of their frustration, and taken to the streets. And of course, I will speak about the most recent development in terms of the massive pay hike for politicians that was actually accepted by the government in the face of all of this discontent. So I will stop sharing and get into my presentation now. So what is driving all of these protest action, the response by the workers? And it has a lot to do with the government's aggressive neoliberal policy agenda. They have been systematically dismantling the social support infrastructure. And here why that is important. When Trinidad and Tobago became independent, like most Caribbean islands, we had a bit of social compromise, okay? In other words, it was a bit of state capitalism, recognizing that, okay, we are small islands and we are part of the global capitalist economy and have been so since the days of slavery. We still felt it necessary, and this came from the bottom, from the pressure of the social movements, from the trade unions, etc., that you need to put in place a social safety system. And what we've been seeing with the government's aggressive neoliberal agenda is dismantling that, including the plans to increase retirement age to 65. They were systematically removing trade unions and collective agreements. For example, ArcelorMittal and the Steelworkers Union, the closure of that steel plant, and of course, that collective agreement being removed. You had, in terms of TSTT, this is the telephone company, sending home almost 80% of the workforce, and again, jeopardizing the collective agreement there. And of course, the closure of the refinery, again, removing the trade union as well as the collective agreement. And just in case, because there are those who actually were saying that when they closed Petrotrin, when the steel plant was closed, the sending home of these hundreds of workers at TSTT is not an attack on the trade union. But just to give you an example, when Petrotrin, that is the Petroleum Company of Trinidad and Tobago, was formed in about 1993 from a group of other companies, there was something called a vesting act, because you now had to transfer the assets into this new entity. And in that vesting act legislation, there were provisions for the continuity of the Oilfield Workers Trade Union, and as well as a recognition of the collective agreement. When they closed Petrotrin and established these other companies, Heritage, Paria, what is interesting is that in that vesting legislation, guess what? No trade union, no collective agreement. All right? The government has also moved to remove consumer subsidies, but at the same time maintaining commercial subsidies. So they've removed fuel subsidies about 6 times, which drove the cost of basic goods and service to extremely high proportions. And then there are talks of removing subsidies on the utilities, water and electricity. And then they came with introducing property tax for, guess what? Residential properties, but not commercial or industrial properties. And we saw as well a proliferation of contract work in the public services, almost completely transforming, an attempt to transform the public service into a precarious work. There is more contract employment in the public service and in state enterprises now more than ever before. So in the midst of all of that, you have long outstanding wage and salary negotiations, namely public sector workers, daily rated workers, city corporation workers. I mean, you're talking about workers at the Water and Sewerage Authority, the Public Transport Service, the Electricity Company, UE, the University of the West Indies, University of Trinidad and Tobago, National Petroleum, Cipriani, Kariri. I mean, the list goes on. Postal workers, the list just goes on and on. A majority of these workers are on 2013 salaries, and some were even on 2007 salaries. Now, after refusing to engage in collective bargaining, the government simply announced that it will be offering the workers 4% for 2 3-year periods without consolidation of cost of living allowance. So that is 002 and 002. So 4% over 6 years, 2014 to 2019. And what is interesting is that after imposing or simply pronouncing, completely violating the principles of collective bargaining, what they did is they just had held 2 meetings with the unions, broke down the negotiations, and referred the matter to the court. The court then, and this is really interesting, at the court, you have what is called a special tribunal, which handles especially public sector workers' negotiations. You had the chairman of that special tribunal, Larry Achong, and I mention his name here because you will see the pivotal role he played in suppressing workers' wage negotiations. He then threatened the unions that if they do not accept the government's offer, and he's a judge, he's supposed to be impartial. He threatened them that if they do not accept the government's 4% for 6 years, he will impose 4% for 10 years instead of 6 years. So faced with that threat, some unions accepted the 4, whilst about 3 major unions, the Public Service Association, which is a major union representing public service workers across the country, the National Union of Government Federated Workers, they represent workers in the local government, and Contractors and General Workers Trade Union representing city corporation workers for San Fernando. All other unions also have reiterated our stance against the imposition, because it's not just about the percentage. This is the important part. It's about the principle of collective bargaining. In other words, if this be allowed, it would mean the end of collective bargaining. Then, if you think that is not bad enough, in the 2024 to 2025 national budget presentation in Parliament last month, the Minister of Finance then said that he recognized that the 4% offer to public service workers was not large. And then he went on to state that he's now going to be offering for the next period 5%. Again, no collective bargaining. It is as though the government operates like a monarchy. So you just make pronouncements in the parliament, and then that is it. There's no engagement. There's no real participation of the masses, no participation of workers, no participation of workers' representatives in a dialogue, what the ILO like to call social dialogue. That's gone. To top it off, after 9 years, the government has not brought one single piece of labor legislation before the parliament. And the only amendment they did, believe it or not, this little amendment they did was the component of recognition of trade unions, which allows people to exercise their fundamental human right to join a trade union of their choice. What they did is they changed a component called the second schedule of the Industrial Relations Act to make a company an essential service. Why that is important? Because under the Industrial Relations Act, which is a huge limitation in that act, it provides that any company that is listed as an essential service do not have the right, 2 things. They do not have the right to strike. And secondly, you cannot have one union represent workers in more than one essential service. So what it does, it limits workers' right to strike, and it limits workers' right to join a trade union of their choice. The government has also refused to ratify any ILO conventions, making all of this really a cocktail for more chaos. Is what we call the weaponizing now of the industrial court. So what we witnessed over the last few months is unprecedented actions by any government since independence. So they last December, last year, arbitrarily removed the president of the industrial court. Never in the history of the industrial court since the passing of the Industrial Relations Act, which give rise to the industrial court, has the tenure of the president of the industrial court been abruptly terminated. Now, bear in mind that the industrial court has been our only institution that is dedicated completely to industrial relations and workplace matters. So it's difficult to understand why, after 58 years as an institution, the president of the industrial court was treated differently to all previous presidents. When she was abruptly removed from office, she was removed by office by phone, you know. Her contract was coming to an end, let's say, I think it would have been the 22nd or 23rd of December. She got a telephone call from the president of the republic saying, thank you for your service. That's it. This has to do with process, procedure, principles of good industrial relations, precedents, separation of powers, rule of law, and worst of all, so that we begin to understand what has created this anger amongst workers. What that showed workers across the country, that if the government is to use state power to remove the president of the industrial court without due process, where does that leave ordinary workers? Now, coming back to a recent Privy Council judgment, a Privy Council judgment stated that the tribunal that I mentioned, that is led, the chairman of Larry Achong, this is what the Privy Council said about this tribunal. It said the tribunal clearly lost sight of principles of impartiality and neutrality, which should govern its conduct as a judicial body. This is very serious indictment on what's supposed to be a judicial body. So we are now faced with this unprecedented situation where our Civil Service Act makes it clear that this chairman of the court must be on the special tribunal under the IRA, and therefore has to be on this tribunal, which the Privy Council have stated quite clearly has lost sight of the principles of impartiality and neutrality. And this is the same person, this is why we speak about the weaponizing of the court. This same person gave the electricity workers for the unprecedented, this is a judgment. You know what was his judgment in terms of wage increase for those workers? 0, 0, 0. Yeah, you heard me correct. Absolutely nothing. He's also the same person that threatened the unions. If they don't accept 4% over 6 years, he will impose 10 years. And recently, as recent as 2 weeks ago, he ruled in a matter where, just for you to understand how crazy this thing has reached. You had negotiations between the central bank and the estate constables. In that same central bank, you also had the monthly paid workers. Those workers got 14%. So the estate constable union asked for 14%. The bank says we can only afford, this is the bank saying that they can afford 6%, no, 9%, sorry. They can afford, this is the employer telling the union, I can afford 9%. The union said, listen, let's go to court because we want to be equal. That judge, in his ruling, did not give 9. I mean, even if he had said, listen, I agree with the employer, they can only pay 9%, I'll give you 9%. He imposed 6%. So it is in that context, you see an eruption of various struggles, starting with port workers. The port operations of Trinidad and Tobago, the port handles 59% of our nation's containers. About 9 years ago, the port union, the Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union, signed an agreement, we're talking about here, for it's a framework agreement to improve the efficiencies of the port. This is the union and the management and the board, improving efficiencies at the port also with a wage increase of 12%. The government came into office and said and made it very clear they refused to honor the agreement. In that regard, the port workers began protest action in around September and went so far as to take strike action. For 2 days, the port was shut down. You know what was the government's response? They decided, rather than to sit across the table and enter into good faith negotiations, they went to the same court that I'm talking about, got an injunction to force the workers back to work. Then you had the electricity workers, the ones who received the 000. Okay, well, they decided, listen, it's time to take to the streets and engage in a series of protest action. But recognizing that the government is prepared to use state power, utilizing the weaponized industrial court to go for injunctions against workers, they decided a new strategy. So they have engaged in simultaneous protests across the country, but on their own time. The commission, under instructions from the government, attempted to go to court to do the same thing as they did with the port workers, which was to go for an injunction. But they failed. They failed because the union strategy worked in that the court can't force workers back to work when the workers didn't leave work in the first place. So that failed. But they did file what is called an industrial relations offense to decertify the union. The union, Oilfield Workers Trade Union, have been representing those workers since 1969. That's how far they are prepared to go. But the workers, undeterred by this, in an act of defiance, actually went to the home of the Minister of Public Utilities on the 9th of November and has continued their protest action every single week in all the electricity locations. Not to be left out, the postal workers who had a job evaluation that was signed off in 2011, the government stated quite clearly they are not going to implement that job evaluation. No, what is also telling us, the government is saying, I don't care what agreements you have. I mean, this has to be a complete breaking down of the social contract. The social contract in any modern democratic society is the recognition of contracts, agreements signed between parties. That is part of the rule of law. They are simply saying, you see, any agreement that is signed with trade unions, we are just not honoring it. And so those postal workers engage in a walk from the Arima post office to El Dorado. I know for many of you, the locations, may not, unless you're from Trinidad or you know Trinidad and Tobago, you're not familiar. But just to give you a sense of the distance, that was a 14-kilometer trek. Those workers walked in the blazing sun for 14 kilometers on the 14th of October. And then on the 15th of October, they trekked for another 10 kilometers from a place called Aranguez straight into Port of Spain. Then last week, Tuesday, or this Tuesday, Tuesday that just gone here, in a show of solidarity and defiance, the port workers, electricity workers, postal workers staged a joint demonstration walking from the port to one of the electricity distribution locations. And then they were joined by transport workers, MTS workers, even workers from the union represented flight attendants. Now, even the professional middle class would have been up in arms. Yeah, as I would have shown earlier, you had the pilots taking action. They got an injunction against them, but they came up with an innovative protest action in the airport where all the pilots who would have been off staged that demonstration. And then you even have the UE lecturers. Now, as I come to a sort of close, the latest to pour fuel on the fire, just conceptualize all of that happening. Workers are on the street, up in arms, agitated, no settling of their negotiations, a complete disregard for the collective bargaining process. You have the weaponization of the court, so you can't get justice in the court. In the midst of all of this, high cost of living, massive increases in goods and services, in the face of all of that, as workers fight for their just due, the government on Thursday announced that they will accept a salary review commission's recommendation of hefty increases for government officials, including the prime minister himself, who will receive 47.2% increase and a $1 million back pay in the face of all of this. I mean, and he also would have been the same person that told the country at the end of September that the country needs to hold the fort because there are difficult times ahead. He said that there'll be a period of difficulty, and then gave himself 47.2% increase and $1 million back pay. And of course, in response to that, last Friday night, we staged a protest action outside the Prime Minister's residence, and we intend to have a national protest, and I'll announce it here today. We will plan a major national protest action on the 7th of December outside the Prime Minister's official office. In closing, the industrial relations crisis really is a result of 4 factors. One, the weaponizing of the industrial court. Two, the government's complete disregard for collective bargaining. Three, the crisis of state capitalism, both its inherent contradiction coupled with incompetence. And of course, the government's aggressive neoliberal agenda and what we consider to be a crisis in governance, which is the collapsing of the post-colonial First Republic. So as I close, I just want to share with you all, just so you get the feel and flavor of the workers' action here in Trinidad and Tobago, because in Tobago the workers are also taking action, just so everyone can really be part of this feel and energy, because there's a lot of energy, which is typical of when Caribbean workers are up in arms, it can get quite intense energy-wise. So let me share with you this protest that I'm about to share with you happened on this is from Friday night. This was right outside the Prime Minister's house itself. I'm just trying to share screen. I'm not sure I'm getting it just right. Just give me 1 second. Share. Oh, okay, right. I got it here now. So, and I hope you can hear it. Right. So, I mean, there's plenty more, but I don't want to go on too long. So, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Ozzy. That was plenty, and I'll applaud. I'm sure people will join me in applauding that presentation. Very fiery, and it just seems like such a dreadful situation down there. But I see you're leading the rebellion. I saw the white beard going past in the in the demonstration. That's very good.
Yeah. He's a troublemaker.
but the question I don't know if I missed it, if you mentioned TUC, Trade Union Congress or Council, operating in this. It seems like a lot of individual unions taking action, and certainly Trinidad Oil Workers Union leading and so on. Is there anybody like that and what they're doing? The other thing is the other question I would say is also about the opposition party. Because there's a lot of political stuff going on here, and I think one way of getting out of this surely has got to be a lot of political questions. And I wondered what the opposition party is saying on this, and can you depend on, are they just as bad or worse? Thanks.
Okay, so the first part, there is, of course, a slogan, Unite to Fight. So both the National Trade Union Center as well as the Joint Trade Union Movement, which are the two federations, are very much together in this struggle. The General Secretary of the National Trade Union Center is also the president of the port workers, and the president of the OWTU is the president of the Joint Trade Union Movement, myself, the general secretary. And you would have seen in one of the protests, all of us really together, especially the one where we had the port workers, the electricity workers, the postal workers, and the transport workers coming together in that action. On Monday, this Monday evening, all of the trade union leaders under two umbrellas, we are going to meet to finalize our plans for Saturday. Let me also add that the opposition has joined in support of our actions, and how much they will mobilize to be part of the action on the 7th, we'll have to see in the coming days, but they have, through the MPs as well as the leader of the opposition, have already expressed support for the struggle.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, I'll give people a chance to bring in with a question. I see the first hand is up there, Stephen. Stephen, you want to take the floor?
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Chair. Two questions, Mr. Ozzi. And I'm just looking for clarification. You said that the Prime Minister gave himself a raise?
Yes, that's exactly what I said. The Salary Review Commission, which comprised of persons that are selected by him, selected by, our post-colonial constitution, officially is by the president on recommendations from the Prime Minister, but in effect by him. So that commission recommended a 47.5% increase for the Prime Minister, and a $1 million, which will result in a $1 million back pay. And he announced on Thursday in his post-cabinet press conference, to the shock and horror of majority of people, that they have decided to accept that increase.
Okay, so now isn't that still in the SRC's hands as far as of final decision being made? Because my understanding is that it hasn't been made yet. It has been recommended and is being reviewed.
No, you're probably a couple of days too late. On Thursday, this Thursday here, at the post-cabinet meeting, the Prime Minister announced that the cabinet has accepted the recommendations, and he went further. And this part is a part that we're going to press him, because we're going to have a press conference Tuesday. He stated that he is going to instruct the Minister of Finance to implement it. We are saying, wait, hang on, shouldn't it come back to the Parliament for at least a debate? So it's completely bypassing those mechanisms. So as it stands right now, it is that the cabinet has accepted the recommendations, and the Minister of Finance is being instructed to implement these increases.
Okay, second question. About the port. I understand that cargo is not being, that ships are not stopping at the port because of the strike, and they are going on to other places to deliver their goods. Because apparently if folks are on strike or they're taking work action, go slow, whatever it is, ships are not going to come there and offload and can be offloaded, and then that's going to cost them some money. Could you explain that a little bit better? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. So when the workers began their action, the first response by the Port Authority was so the workers are not working. They attempted to bring in military personnel to do the work. That failed because they're not trained, especially to do the crane operations. So that failed. The second thing, instead of coming to the table and having a discussion with the union, rather than doing that, they attempted to use the coercive arm of the state, military, to do the jobs of ordinary workers. But that failed because they were not properly trained to do that. So that failed. They then had this idea, a bright idea, because most of this action was taking place at the Port of Spain. There's another port called Point Lisas. So their idea was, okay, let's just move the shipments to Point Lisas. That also failed because logistically it could not work. Secondly, the operators in Point Lisas would have been in solidarity with those in Port of Spain. So that was a good show of solidarity. So that failed. So then the third was this fear mongering, especially by the business community, by capital, that if the workers don't relent and go back to work, Trinidad and Tobago could lose the shipments. The shipments would go somewhere else. But that also couldn't work because the ships were out in the sea. They can't just simply go to an export. So what that did is it forced the government to go to the court. That is why they went for the injunction, because they thought they could have broken the strike by those measures, none of which worked. So they were forced to go to the court, get an injunction to force the workers back to work. But when they did that, the workers engaged in what we call as a strategy, work to rule. So in other words, instead of giving an extra, because we all know workers always give an extra, they decided to withhold the extra, not withhold what they are being paid to do. They withhold simply the extra, the overtime and all of that. Then they were finally forced to meet with the union on Friday. I think it was Friday.
Thank you.
So we
You
wait
got
for
another question,
those deliberations.
Steve, you wanna?
I have other questions, but I'll leave it right there. I'll let somebody else speak.
Thanks.
Can I say, is there anything that we in Britain, workers in Britain, can do to assist you?
Yeah, I think at least either a statement or some show of solidarity at the High Commission would be very, very helpful, especially around that 7th of December mass demonstration. I think that could be useful.
Okay, thank you. Okay, there are questions. I see Joe putting up his virtual hand. No,
Hi, sorry about that.
go
Something's
on, Joe, the real hand. Put it up. There you go.
Wow, I'm absolutely shocked by what I've heard today. I'm so pleased I came on board. But I live in the UK and had absolutely no idea what was happening. It's disgusting. It's words just fail me at the moment. And if any of my fellow countrymen or women want to do something in the UK, please get in touch with me. I'm known at the embassy. Please link up and let's just work together to get this resolved. We don't deserve to be treated like that.
Thank you. We hear you, Joe. We will be in touch with you, and we will discuss some action that we might be able to take. So we might well be calling on you. Thanks, Laura. Question from Laura. Unmute. Thank you. Thanks, Joe.
Ozzy, you told us a lovely story at the executive meeting about the song that was written.
Oh, the Calypso. Yes. Oh, yes. The Calypso. I wonder if I can find a way to. Yeah, I can send that to you all.
Well, why don't you describe what happened? Because it was really lovely.
Okay, so what we decided is that, okay, we wanted to add another element, another flavor to our struggle. And Calypso has always been a sort of voice for the voiceless, of an art form that allows ordinary people to express themselves in a particular way on social issues, cultural issues, economic issues, political issues. And we decided that, you know what, let us draw on that tradition. And so the president of our union, Ansel Roger, decided to compose a Calypso. It's called The Truth. So he wrote it, composed it, and have actually produced this Calypso. It's played on radio a couple of times, but as you can imagine, it's quite political. So one of the newspapers actually did a nice clip, which is what I'm going to try to send to you guys. Because in addition to the Calypso, what we did is we went around with a barrel where we burn images of the of key leaders within the government. That's because, you see, that is drawing on our, you know, our tradition of fighting slavery and colonialism. We were very dramatic on the plantation when we wanted to express our dissatisfaction with the plantation owners. So we draw on that tradition. So some people found it a bit too dramatic, like how could you do that? But again, that is because they're not connected to what is our tradition. And we see us doing nothing more than what our ancestors did on the plantation when fighting oppression, and we are under oppression. There are some people who think that somehow you can simply negotiate or your way out with capital. But when you have a government that has an aggressive neoliberal agenda and is willing to use, this is the key, willing to use the power of the state power and its resources against workers, which just as on the plantation they did, then we utilize just as our ancestors fought back. So we have a calypso and a barrel where we burn the images of those leaders that are oppressing us. I will share the calypso with you all.
Thank you, Ozzy. I don't see any more questions. Are there any more questions or comments on the floor? Okay, what we'll do, Ozzy, I was just checking my diary. I see the 7th is a Saturday, which means the embassy will be closed here. There's no point us demonstrating in front of an empty embassy. But I'll talk with colleagues and we'll see if we can maybe organize something for Friday, at least get some pictures or something taken on, or a day before.
Oh, that'd be great.
So we'll discuss. We've got I've got a question. I've got 2 hands up. Francisco, you're first, and then Stephen after.
Yeah, I just wrote in the, thanks very much, Ozzy, for such an inspiring and firing presentations. This is quite nice to see. We need these sort of things. I wrote in the chat that perhaps CLS could draw a statement demanding respect for workers' rights, obviously in Trinidad and Tobago, reassertion of collective bargaining, then conditional lifting of the injunction against the right of workers to withdraw their labor, a universal principle recognized by all civilized countries, something of that sort that can come from here, which perhaps is in line with what the workers there are trying to do in Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Francisco. We'll talk. Stephen?
Yes, thanks again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Ozzy, one more question. You mentioned the pilot striking. What impact is that having economically when you combine it with the dock workers' labor action? Thank you.
Sure, but let me just also again restate, like the situation with the dock workers, and by the way, this is not new for this government. Last year, they filed an injunction against teachers. The teachers were about to take what they call rest and reflect on Monday, and they went to the courts on Sunday night and got an injunction against the teachers. That is what they do when workers take action. And it's the same thing with the pilots. They eventually went to take an injunction because it was having an economic impact in terms of the pilots' action, the port workers' action, the postal workers' action. Those actions are going to have extreme negative effect, which is why, and I forgot to mention this part, I did say I was going to talk about it, which is why the chambers of commerce, unprecedented, did a joint statement, and when I say the chambers, I'm talking about the American Chamber of Commerce, the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Commerce, the Energy Chamber of Commerce. It's like all of capital ganged up against workers. Why? Because they were having an economic impact. If it wasn't, it wouldn't matter to them once it's not affecting their bottom line. But I like to repeat a statement of a former president general of our union. A strike is meant to hurt, because in order for you to get justice and in order for you to get respect, for you to live at least with some dignity, you have to land a blow against capital and those who support capital against the workers.
Anticipated economic impact as far as prices and inflation and stuff. Can you talk on that? Thank you.
Well, I don't know that it will have any more inflationary impact than what is already happening and what workers are already going through. You see, this age-old bourgeois argument that if there is an increase in wages, there'll be an increase in prices. That's a bourgeois concept. That is not, there's no empirical data that supports that. What we know for a fact is that right now, as we speak, strike or no strike, when a worker goes to the grocery, they have to put back items because the price is too high. Workers are being put out of their homes because they cannot afford the rent. Workers are losing their homes because they cannot afford the mortgages. That is the reality that people are facing right now. And there comes a point where enough is enough. So I don't see that the action of the workers, because to me, that is what is implied in your question, that the action of workers is going to have this effect where it will increase prices. No, the action of workers is to respond to already difficult situation that they are in order to at least have a decent value for their labor power. In other words, what the workers are struggling for is to reduce income inequality and to close the gap between those who have and those who don't have.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ozzy. Okay, I think on that note, there's no more hands. We shall just, all that remains is for us to thank you very much for a very stimulating discussion. And I think I will actually put forward to the executive members that we meet earlier than the planned time so we could plan some action, taking into consideration the things that Francisco said as well. So to both of the speakers, I hope you will join me in just saying thank you for very good presentations. Before we close the meeting, there's a chance now for people to maybe make any announcements about any events or anything's happening, or if there's any other business. Ozzy?
Yeah, just an announcement. But two things, which is kind of unrelated to the topic, but just last night we had a march again, just for comrades to be aware. Yesterday was the 6th anniversary of the closure of the Petroleum Company of Trinidad and Tobago. And we marked that with a protest action last night at the refinery. Later this afternoon, I'm attending a Palestinian rally, and I've been asked to speak on behalf of the trade union movement, and I will definitely also bring solidarity from Caribbean Labor Solidarity to the rally this afternoon.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Yes, and we will do our solidarity work up here. As I said, we'll try and meet earlier than usual to see what action we can pull off in a pretty quick time, really, because this is an urgency, and we will as well contact trade unions over here to see what kind of support we can get and what action we can take. And definitely, we can probably get them a bit nervous at the embassy if we pick it a couple of times and they get worried about tourists coming down there. So you're not without friends. We'll be fighting up here for you as well. Okay, thank you all. If there is any other notices or anything, if not, okay, we shall see you in January. Have a good end of year celebration, whatever you do.
Great, comrades.
Okay, hi, talk to you. Thank you.
Great talk, Ozzy. Thank you.
Hopefully we can do some. Hopefully we can do something on this text.
Yes.
Sorry,
All right.
I've got a notice.
Good.
Are you still there?
Yes.
I've got a notice from Global African Congress. We every year we try to engage with the British government about reparations, and you'll know that from the Commonwealth heads of government recently, that there was a dispute or disagreement between the Labour Prime Minister of Britain and the Commonwealth heads of government. In that, so I'm just trying to find the document while I'm talking. Yes, that they didn't want to talk about reparations, and the British government didn't want to talk about reparations, but the Commonwealth heads of government were insistent that the final statement included a discussion on reparations. Reparations isn't just about a financial return or gift or reimbursement for the enslavement of African peoples during the transatlantic slave trade. It's also about repair and the recognition of the desperate situation that the Caribbean, Africa, and the Commonwealth has been left in post-enslavement, and the fact that there's a brain drain, that resources are not being delivered back to the Commonwealth, while the Europeans and the British specifically are benefiting and still benefit and have benefited from the labours of our forebears and our ancestors. So on the 11th of December, which is a Wednesday, just after parliamentary Prime Minister's question time, there's going to be a lobby of Parliament by Global African Congress, which is basically all of us. We don't have to be a member of Global African Congress to lobby your MP. So if you have an MP in Britain, and you know your MP, we ask that you send a letter. There's a link I've just put in the chat. You send a letter to your MP saying that we want to make sure that we can engage with you one-to-one after PMQs, and that you come and join us in a rally at Portcullis House at 5 o'clock on the same Wednesday, the 11th. I'm just trying to, I can only find the flyer for the 5 o'clock event, but from 12 o'clock in the House of Commons on the 11th, you can meet with your MP, and from 5 o'clock in Portcullis House, there will be a rally, Reparations Now, with Judy Richards from Global African Congress, Roland Hoslin, who Caribbean Labour Solidarity know, the MP John MacDonald, who's a Labour MP who's going to host the event for us, and Kate Dowie Wilson. This will be a hybrid rally, and will be in one of the committee rooms. I think it's the Harold Wilson committee room in Portcullis House, which is opposite the House of Commons. I'll send Caribbean Labour Solidarity the links, if that's okay, comrades, and then you could share it with your readers.
Yeah,
but they can send that letter out to their MPs, if that's okay. Thank you. It's unity and solidarity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Goku. Thanks very much for that. Now, I did at the beginning share a little bit about the Commonwealth Conference, but we were also critical of Lamy going to Africa and telling the Africans that, it's not about cash because there's a cost of living crisis. I wrote an article actually pointing out to him that, a lot of the things that we want to achieve and to do and to fix will need cash. It is about money for us, and that there has to be, it's not only an apology, but it's also about money. We're demanding that as well, and that conversation needs to be happening, as the Commonwealth heads definitely said, it's time for them to open a discussion. Okay, all, thank you very much, and we shall see you at the next meeting, and thanks for supporting our meetings. Without you, it's no meeting. Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much. Very educational.
Thank you all.
Thank
you all.
you. Take care.
Thank you. Take care, Ozzy. I want a copy of that poster behind your head of Walter. So if you see an empty space on your wall, to chase me down.
It's
gone. Just make a copy and send it.
Thanks. Thank you.
Have a good rest of the day, everyone.
Hang in a bit, Ozzy. Thanks.
I'm looking for how to leave. I can never find it on my phone. I'm not lurking to listen to your conversation. I'm just trying.
Okay, we're just trying to get some of the executive members who are here for quick. See if we can maybe arrive at a date when we can have a meeting before the usual second Tuesday. Partly because I'm traveling on the 16th. I won't be around after the 16th of December. So I think if we want to try and plan some action or picket, we might be able to mobilize some few people to get down to the embassy. Is there any date that people can meet this week? Is there any date that's not good for people?
There's two things here. I mean, I know there's no one in the embassy on a Saturday, but I'm sure they wouldn't go, oh God, there's 20 people outside, we'll tell the government to give in. I'm not sure that's quite what we're really doing. I think what we're really doing is to make a demonstration so that we can then say to our colleagues, our comrades in Trinidad, that there are workers in Britain who are with you. So I think Saturday could be a day because there's people who won't be at work who could make it, maybe.
Okay, one of the things I'm thinking Saturday is they won't have the flag up if they're not in the office, you see. So I think one of the things that shows Trinidad and Tobago, the flag flying, we get pictures taken with that in the background. People know where we're at. But I'm open to us doing it on Saturday. Well, Saturday is not good for me, I must say. I've got a conference that whole day. So it's why I would think.
If you have, other people will have. What about Friday?
Yeah. Friday is better. Friday's got a better chance.
Then we could take some photos.
Yes,
take
yes.
some photos, and we could send them to Ozzy, and he could then, that could then be held up, as it were, in Trinidad. On their demonstration.
If people are
we will let the media, we will also let the Trinidad media know that you guys are doing that. What I may need is someone's WhatsApp contact, so I can also, the media may want to call you and say, well, why are you guys doing this in London? You know?
Okay, that'd be good. We should try and get some newspaper too. I think I've been talking with Jamaica Gleaner, but we need other. I don't know the Voice. We can maybe try and get some newspapers to know about it. That might report in the Caribbean. Okay. All right. So should we then try and do a plan for Friday to see if we can plan what time and so on? Do we need a Zoom meeting to do that, or we want to do that on the?
No, let's just do it.
Let's email. Okay, let's email and agree time and place where we meet.
It gets dark at 4.
Yeah, we do it before. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1 o'clock.
Okay.
1 o'clock would be great. Shall we agree 1 o'clock? Well, London people we're talking about. Okay, we need to talk to other people. So we let you go now.
We'll put it round the executive mailing list.
Yeah. Let's email and let's stop and let's plan. And this guy, Rob that was on that said he's willing to take action. Remember one of the attendees. You got his details.
We'll keep him informed of the plan.
Yes, we need to think about all the people who we can join us. Yeah.
Wolf Sullivan was here. He's no longer still here, but Wolf Sullivan from the TUC. We could possibly
I know that.
call.
Yes.
I'm going to a Southeast TUC Waste Relations Committee on Wednesday, so I'll at least mention it there. Yeah,
but the other thing, of course, as well, is that this is not going to end on Saturday, so we need to keep building up trade union support for taking action and writing letters and whatever it is, trade unionists do. So we'll mobilize all the contacts we have with trade unions and so on to build up a good letter writing, and if we get a dozen unions signing a letter or something and sending some support one way or the other. Okay, guys.
Can I just say, what we've done before is if anyone's got a trade union meeting in the meantime, it might only be 20 or people or so at a meeting, but if everyone holds up something that they've just printed off saying solidarity with the workers of Trinidad, and we send quite a few of them, that's it's a little bit of help.
Okay, there's a few. Okay, I see in my thing that's Congress House. Oh no, that's gone. Is it?
Ozzy?
Yeah, that's gone.
Yeah.
You have any any Trinidad and Tobago posse in Jamaica where we could try and do anything?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. Can I see if I can get that information for you?
Yeah, man. Send me anything. Maybe we can.
Yeah, I'm almost certain we do. I almost certain we do. And let me get the location for you.
Yeah.
I'll find out
and-
from the
and-
Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Yeah,
Okay.
that goes for all of us really. If we got contacts and friends in Jamaica to put them in touch, so we can try and mobilize something down there. That'd be good.
Could be.
All right, guys, let's do email.
Okay,
Take care.
great.
Have a good